Welcome back to The Tipple. Today, we're diving into what sustainability really looks like in wine, beyond those buzzwords. I'm joined by two brilliant women shaping the future of the industry. Sally Evans, founder of the award-winning and sustainably led Château George, and Anne Jones, founder of Limestone Jones, who brings deep expertise in responsible retail, supply chains, and future-forward wine strategy. In this short tipple, we will unpack the practical, the personal, and the powerful ideas that can genuinely change how we drink. So let's get into it. Sally, Anne, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
I am super excited about this podcast on sustainability. And we've set ourselves a huge challenge to talk about sustainability in a micro element of time. So this could be a very big place to start. But when you both talk about sustainability, whether that's in drinks, whether that's in wine, what's the biggest misconception that you wish we could just debunk and just stop people talking about and get rid of?
Well, I might be quite controversial here. And luckily, I've known Sally for a really long time. So hopefully Sally won't mind me saying this. But the biggest misconception for me is that boutique is the only way to be beautiful in sustainability. It's probably easier to talk about, and if I'm honest, it's probably more fun. But actually, the biggest change can be made at scale. So I think we have to remember to include everybody in this conversation, including the big scale producers. And obviously, some of those producers are doing really incredible things. Even if it doesn't feel quite as beautiful, actually, it probably is having more impact on the planet to make a small change at a big scale than to make a big change at a small scale. So I think we have to be really inclusive, but inclusive to all sizes of production.
Sally?
Can I jump in on that one? Okay, so I absolutely agree in terms of economies of scale. That's something I fight about every day in terms of my wine production. However, I will just throw in a point that boutique wineries often have very close connections with their consumers and their customers, and therefore they have a real opportunity to have a direct conversation, and I see that with every visitor that comes through. But I'm going to be even more provocative. I'm going to say that I think that organic as the ultimate goal for winemaking, and often, depending on where you are and the challenges you have in your region, organic can often be much less sustainable.
Luckily, Sally, I'm also going to agree with you on that one too.
I wondered where the provocation was going, but we've got agreement on that one.
I would just add a bit of clarity to that. I think that organic can be absolutely brilliant, and the best organic producers, particularly in kind of drier, warmer climates, are doing some amazing things. So one of my many hats is I also work with the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation, and we often say that the very best regenerative producers are probably organic, and the very best organic producers are probably regenerative. There's lots and lots of crossover of all these terms of if you're focusing on amazing outcomes and soil health. But at the moment, given where we are with science and products, being organic in a wet, humid, kind of cool region, but with wetter, humid seasons, is just really problematic because you end up with quite a lot of copper use, which is quite toxic. But I agree with you, Sally, but I actually think that will be solved by science, hopefully in the not too distant future, with products that are not copper and sulfur to fight against mildews.
If I link a bit of what you said in both of those points together, because I agree, if we want to see the change we need to see, it has to happen mass scale. But we can probably agree that boutique can be a way to test and learn fast.
Definitely.
And maybe get that scale out.
Boutique producers can do the most wonderful, beautiful things. I just worry that people, whether that be in the industry possibly as much as consumers, I worry that people tend to assume that a smaller producer will be more sustainable than a bigger producer. And I think that is to me the big misconception.
Linking in the point you made around often boutique or smaller can be closer to consumer, then you get a really interesting dynamic when you talk about organic, because in a lot of the research that I've done in my career, when you ask people about organic, well, it's the good one, but they can't necessarily articulate why or how. And I do think we have this another misconception perhaps that we're talking about here? How do we start to educate consumers who have grown up with the perception that organic is best for us without necessarily understanding what that can fully mean as we get closer to what we're putting in our bodies from a food and a drink point of view?
I mean, I think equally we have to still give organic a lot of credit, because it's the one thing that consumers have understood that is linked to the agricultural element of production. Whereas, I mean, and probably we might come on to talk about this a little bit later, there's this big disconnect between kind of ESG, sustainability, corporate reporting and lightweighting and all of that stuff, and then agriculture and the reality of what it's like when you've got your boots on in a vineyard, or indeed with other alcoholic products in any kind of field. And sort of that disconnect between agriculture and ESG, corporate ESG, is a real challenge. And organic has done an enormous amount for people being able to have a concept that they're thinking about the field of what has happened in that kind of the origin of the product.
And I think the problem is that because organic has become so widely known, that means that sometimes, and that's certainly speaking from small vineyard owners, they may feel a commercial pressure to have the organic label because from an economic standpoint, they feel they have to, so that they will get their wines stocked by certain purchasers, when actually it's very, very difficult in our wet, humid climate here in Bordeaux to be organic. And we've now got new copper laws coming in, which is going to reduce the amount of copper, spread out the sprayings. And so you've got this whole tension there between a grower who wants the organic label for actually selling their wine, and yet can't make a lot of it because of the climate and restrictions on what they can use to protect it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would say that I think the market is changing, though. And I think the Nordic monopolies are doing an amazing job in this, and some of the other certification schemes, in understanding that parts of organic are really valuable, but organic is very limited. It's very, well, I said focused. It's very focused. And actually sustainability is much bigger than that. And I think we're starting to see retailers understand that it's only part of the story, and therefore it's becoming a lot more nuanced in terms of what they will pay for and what they will allow through to tenders. And the same with different certification schemes. Actually, we're seeing them all becoming a lot more nuanced as well. There are 2 or 3, the Alentejo one's particularly good, where they will pay, there's a premium on buying grapes from wineries that are certified with their sustainability program, and it is so much more nuanced than organic. So that market is moving with time, but that consumer perception, I think, is lagging a bit behind the market, which is lagging a bit behind the reality of production.
So how do you balance that? How do you balance that reality element of we need consumers and shoppers to understand it to buy it? How do you balance that commercial reality with the environmental responsibility? Because ultimately, it's about making choices, but I would argue the right choices.
Yeah, I think there are choices to be made at every stage. So from my perspective, when I started Château George Set, I had a blank sheet of paper. I had vines that were mature, but I didn't have any family history saying you need to do this, you need to do that. So I sat down and I thought about it. And basically, all my sustainability decisions come from a point of common sense and balance. So starting with the soil and the vineyard, okay, we've got to look after the soil. We've got to have more plants. We're going to plant some hedgerow. We've got to increase the amount of organic matter in the soil. So all of the goodness, stop chemical weed killers, stop pesticides. But at the same time, made the decision not to go organic because I found a very very natural friendly, but made using technology, which is called biocontrol products, which help me protect the vines from mildew, but actually don't have to use copper, for example. Then it comes through to other decisions around packaging, recycled paper made into boxes that are then can be recycled, buying bottles locally that are lightweight because happen to have very near us a bottle producer that has the most amazing furnace replacement system. I think it has the first electric furnace, which has cut down carbon emissions, using seasonal food on the platters. So all of those things were common sense. Now, that doesn't mean I'm totally sustainable, but it just means that all those little decisions, I think, add up to creating a kind of balance.
Yeah, I mean, what is totally sustainable? That's another 3-hour philosophical discussion, isn't it? I think that linking of commercial reality with of commercial positioning with the kind of reality on the ground, I think is one of the things that I think about most. I think partly because I work half my time, I like to say I've got one foot in the vineyard and one foot in the boardroom. So kind of trying to link that together. And I think one of the slightly boring but evolving topics of this is actually data. Actually, how are we expressing things? So, for example, you take someone like the Wine Society, who's done this lovely project where they calculated what they would have spent if they'd offset their carbon emissions, and they've invested that money into kind of nature and social projects in their producers. And I think we're starting to see that at a much bigger commercial macro scale. So, for example, banks are seeing that carbon credits, etc., are being maybe misused or are not doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing. So they're starting to look at how else they can invest that money. But of course, if they want to invest that money into environmental projects, they will need some sort of metric. So actually watching everyone move from, and again, we've got quite good at reporting on, it's all relative, quite good at reporting on things like carbon emissions and bottle lightweighting and things that you can measure. But then actually how you put a metric on Mother Nature is really hard, and because it's evolving constantly and it's not designed on a 1-year cycle. We're all used to the idea that vines take 5 years to turn into something that you can actually make decent wine out of. So actually expecting an annual kind of return of soil organic carbon or whatever it is. So actually we're starting to understand what baselines we need so that we can then demonstrate that the good practices are having a positive impact, and that then will allow more investment. So it's just this kind of cycle that I liked. We talked a little bit before about things lagging behind each other. I like to think of it more as a cycle, which I think is we're gradually getting there. Sort of linking together this agricultural benefit of actually the positive planet impact, which is all based on the soil. Like soil is the second biggest carbon sink after the oceans, and it's where all the impact is, really, where all the positive impact is that can mitigate the negative impacts of the rest of the supply chain. But actually how a business or an investor can make that correlation is sort of evolving and continuing to evolve. And we're seeing in Europe TCND and various different things about biodiversity and nature reporting. So we're starting to get to grips with it, but it's a bit messy and it's going to take a while.
And I think, sorry, I was just going to add to that from the commercial standpoint. If we look at bottles as an example, while I'll use lightweight bottles for my white wine, I, at the moment, am not happy to go under 500 grams for my red wine, because there's still a perception by consumers that a better bottle means a better wine. Now, I can go all out and say, right, I'm going to do a really lightweight bottle. And it has to be said, the 500 grams looks good. Okay. Now, I could go lower, but I'm selling a wine at a certain price. If I can't sell that wine, then I'm not going to be economically sustainable. So I think there is this constant tension. And I think cutting things down slowly, seeing if that works for a vintage maybe, and then, maybe you have to increase the bottle weight by 50 grams because you find another model that looks good and will make your product look good and sell. I think that is a reality. Yeah. So,
it's another of those things where we all look for nice binary answers. And often the answer is a bit more nuanced. And again, there's lots of opportunity with producers decarbonising the production, or, for example, glass reuse, where actually if you're going to reuse a bottle, it might be a bit heavier. But actually, if it's going to be reused 8 times, then the positive impact of that, both commercially and for the planet, is enormous. So there are other options. I mean, but I also think there's a mindset shift that is happening. But again, with consumers maybe slower. Laura Catena always makes this this lovely kind of connection with a suitcase. Back in the day, your heavy trunk was like the coolest thing, and the heavier it was and the more people you needed to carry it, the more impressive you were. And now the lighter your suitcase, the more expensive it is and the better it is. So actually, once we get to designs that look absolutely stunning, same with glasses. I mean, actual glasses, the more delicate and beautiful and light a glass is, the more we go, oh, that's impressive. So once we can get to that with bottles, then that's going to be a huge step forward. But it might, these big mindset shifts happen in generations. We can't expect to see it all immediately.
No, that's right.
They do. So, but what can we do to shortcut it? Because you're absolutely right. We've got to stop looking through a binary lens. If I do this here, that's going to be a target over here. How do in the example? I mean,
humans move really slowly. One of the things that's always astounded me most about the human race is how long it took us to put wheels on a suitcase. As a race, like with 1970s until we got a wheelie suitcase. It's a box on wheels. Like,
I don't know, a game changer when it happened though.
Yeah, exactly. So how can we?
But that's my point, isn't it? Because if you think about a suit at that point, something had to change, and people didn't need wheels on suitcases because people carried the case, and you can get into a whole socioeconomic breakdown there of the appropriateness of that. But something has to happen for that change to drive. And you're right. We, as human beings, we don't like change. It is dangerous to our brains. It's something that we fight against, even if the outcome might be great. So how do you take that need to still educate consumers, but how can we turn that flywheel quicker? How can we help them make better choices without perhaps overwhelming them? Because I absolutely have the privilege of sitting with two people today who absolutely know this space, but people don't have you sat in their pockets telling you what they should and shouldn't buy at the fixture. How do we help consumers not be overwhelmed by some of the jargon and make a decision that actually isn't the right decision? Because
this is what
so much at play.
There's this is what one of my friends in at the Wine Society always says. He always says that we have to make decisions for consumers, not necessarily the decisions that consumers ask for. And I think that's where the role of the retailer comes in, and where the Nordic monopolies are doing such a great job. But also we're seeing lots of other retailers trying to ensure that actually the products that are on the shelf give consumers good decisions. And actually over time, I think the retailers are going to have to lead in this space.
And also, when you think about it, if you look at the change that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of consumer interest in food and what we're putting in our mouths and where it comes from, there is a general shift in understanding and being interested in provenance. And wine has been kept a little bit of a secret. And it's only from the 2024 vintage, for example, in the EU, that we've had to put on a QR code or a link so that people can actually understand what the ingredients are. So wine, in a way, is catching up in lots of ways, because I feel that there are a lot of people who are so particular as to why they buy all their vegetables on a certain Saturday morning, a certain farmer's market, and they know exactly how it's been treated. And then they buy a bottle of wine, don't think anything of it, and open it up. Now, maybe the labeling, for example, will help. And it's great for winemakers who really don't put crap in their wine. So that's fantastic. But, there is a huge surge in interest. Maybe we just need to make sure that wine is part of that wave of interest in what we're putting in our mouths.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's where it comes back to this understanding of production, because I think wine has this challenge that, again, possibly a slightly controversial statement. When you're in a kind of shopping environment, wine pretty much all looks the same compared to vegetables, or when you're looking at chicken and there's this nice binary decision of free range or corn-fed or not. And actually, when it comes to wine, everyone has this lovely assumption that it's all come from an old chateau or a nice, clean, sparkly New World vineyard with a river running through it and a mountain in the background. And the grape has kind of fallen into the bottle and ta-da, wine. And so I think that we've been reluctant to lift the carpet on the messier parts of it. And now we're kind of sowing the repercussions of that.
I think you've just given me an idea. I'm going to put free range on my wine bottles.
Love it.
And then, well, if you've got free range sheep and chickens in the vineyard, then you could probably just put free range with an asterisk.
Yeah. Although the chicken wine might already be leaning into that space. It's a really
to be fair,
interesting...
they're doing some really good stuff.
I think anybody that's branding is so synonymous that somebody rebrands it for you is brilliant. There's a really interesting point there, though, in terms of what you were saying, Sally. Not just are we really conscious about what we're putting in our body, and then you just open a bottle of wine, but the way we consume wine, the way we taste it, but it's a dichotomy of every sip of wine you take, you're looking for this flavor profile and you're indulging it in that way. So we're really engaged in what the wine tastes like, yet a complete disengagement from how it's being produced to get there. And I think you're right when you talk about the way people are concerned about maybe through a food profile of how their veg is growing or how their protein is reared, to wine not really operating in that space, yet it feels inherently like it is a category that should operate in that space.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know what Sally thinks about this. I think there's something around the shifting dynamics between wine being a luxury and wine being a commodity. And I think for me, that line is moving, as particularly in the UK. I think maybe it's different, a little bit different where Sally is, but that commodity wine is disappearing because it is expensive. And so actually, if you're talking about a luxury product, then we do have the opportunity then to, because people will be more considered, they're spending more money. We need to be better at communicating how that wine aligns with their values, in the same way that we would if somebody were buying a different kind of luxury product. It's how it aligns with a person's personal kind of mission statement or who they are, and actually how we connect those. I'm not going to say the word stories. We've got this far without saying it. How those stories come to life for people in a way that they can really connect with.
Yeah, and that is actually an opportunity for the wine producer to really actually make sure that they communicate about everything, all those elements to do with their product. But also, I think in the past, for some reason, and maybe Anne, you've got a view on this, wine has been just shrouded in mystery. And it always sort of seen as this very mysterious, romantic thing that appeared on celebration tables, maybe because there was very little wine industry in the UK, in the US, until relatively recently. And therefore, people were not traveling and visiting vineyards and understanding more, maybe. But there was a lot of mystery, wasn't there, about it?
We wanted it to be mysterious. We've spent generations training people that wine is this big magical thing, and you have to go away and study for 14 years before you're allowed to appreciate it properly. And you need to have a vocabulary of 70,000 different fruit before you can articulate how you think it tastes. Whereas we haven't done that with cheese, even though there are some similarities there. So no, I think, and I don't know that magic is a problem per se. But I think that I think what we need to do is bring that kind of stardust to the vineyards, and it not just be about the bottle on the table.
Final question to you both then, thinking about that magic. What one practical, easy step that anybody could go out and do today, tomorrow, next week, would you want our listeners to do when it comes to just drinking a bit more sustainably?
Obviously, I'm going to say get to know the producer. Get to know the producer, and if they are, if they've got anything about them, then on the back label of their wine, they will provide information or a QR code so that you can find out information while you're browsing it in the shop. And it's up to the producers to be completely transparent. No greenwashing, transparency, and get to know the producer.
And I would say choose your retailer well. Who aligns with the values. I'm sorry, I've got one more, I think, which is that if you're choosing between two bottles, you don't have to decide to buy something completely different. But if you're choosing between two bottles, maybe choose the lighter one. And just imagine the vineyard. The mindset shift for me is every time you pick up a bottle, just imagine the producer and imagine the vineyard, and try and make that mental connection between the bottle in a fairly sterile shop environment or online. Try and make that connection with the fact that it's come from a field.
Brilliant advice. Ultimately, sustainability is about building a sustainable world, sustainable vineyards, sustainable supply chain. If we want to continue to enjoy this product, we as consumers have a responsibility to step into that sustainable
and
place
sustainable
as well.
businesses. We need this industry to be resilient to climate change, because otherwise we will not have an industry. And actually, we need everyone to be paid fairly, and we need to have an industry that survives for the sake of everybody that's within it and for the sake of the land that we're stewards of.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a brilliant place to end for the industry, but for the land that we are no more than stewards for. And sometimes we should remember that as well. Sally, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for genuinely and honest and hopeful insight. You both talked a little bit about being provocative and controversial. I don't think you were. I think we've had a brilliant, open and honest conversation. Sustainability can feel complicated, but I think you've just helped us boil it down to small choices really will make a difference. And actually, that difference is the responsibility of all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this tipple, please do share it with somebody who loves great wine and great stories. And as always, keep raising their glass to progress, purpose, and people. We'll be back in your ears next time.